Vickers at Credit Union. And I'm a community educator lead here at ENT. So we go out every day into the community and teach financial wellness classes. There's a chance you have seen one of our presentations before. This isn't our first time coming out to ACC. We've taught our retirement simulation and some other classes out at ACC. And today's class is virtual and it's on money mapping. So we're going to talk about budgeting, saving strategies, lots of different things. Before I came out and started working for ENT and teaching financial wellness, I was a high school English teacher. So I worked mostly with 9th and 12th graders. And they did a lot of college and career planning, trying to figure out, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? And during that time, my students always had questions about money. They said, Miss Vickers, how can we plan for our dreams, figure out what job we want, how all of that's going to work together if we're not talking about how to manage our finances and how much money we need to make to live and how to budget and things like that. So it really sparked my passion for financial wellness and spreading that information and helping people figure out how that component can help them reach their dreams and goals. So now I get to go out every day into the community and share some tips and tricks to help you all with that exact piece. I'm here today with my coworker who I'm going to pass it over to introduce herself and get us started.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katie Griffin, and I am the Supervisor of Community Education for ENT Credit Union. And really appreciate y'all having us today. Like Sarah said, we've done a couple classes so with your group, and so we're excited to be back for another today. So I've been with ENT for going on 6 years now, but I've been working in the industry for about 15 years. And a lot of that time was spent working in the branches, which gave me a lot of great opportunities to just learn a ton and learn all kinds of different ways to help our members out. And now I'm on the education side of things. So get to do these classes with Sarah, and which I just love so much. And when I'm not at work, I love focusing on all things wellness. So physical wellness, mental wellness, those are really important to me. And I always like to just kind of mention that because sometimes we forget how important financial wellness is. And it can be more difficult to focus on those other areas of wellness in our life if we don't have that financial wellness piece down. So it's one of the reasons why I love going out in the community and teaching these classes. But today our class is titled Money Mapping. So we have a couple different topics that we are going to cover. But before we get into those kind of key takeaways, first, I want to have everybody log into Menti. So you can either scan that QR code you see on the screen, or you can use your device to go to menti.com. If you go to menti.com, it'll prompt you for a code. So you'll enter that 8-digit code that you see on the screen, 98487038. And so the reason why we ask you to go ahead and pull that up, you can use either your cell phone or the device that you're using to view this presentation. And the reason why we ask you to pull that up is because we will have some different kind of interactive engagement questions throughout the class. We'll be asking you to use that Menti platform to submit some answers. And thank you, Sarah, for putting that code in the chat. In case you get kicked out at any point, you can go back to menti.com and put that 8-digit code in. All right, so as I said, we have a couple different areas that we're going to be covering today. So we're going to be going through some different types of budgeting methods, talking about why creating a budget is important, and then some budget busters that we want to look out for, as well as different types of savings that are out there. So we're going to go ahead and test out that Menti with a question. So the first question we have for you is, what word or words do you associate with budgeting? So you can type in some different words. You can do one or a couple. Menti will give you all a moment to submit some answers. And as you do that, they will pop up on the screen for us. Spreadsheet. Yep, I'm a fan of spreadsheets, so for sure get that one. I got control, planning, financing, future, overwhelming, for sure. Excel, math. So we got savvy, expenses. Nice. Yeah, these are all really great answers. Future, goals, love that one, discipline. Yeah, so when we think about budgeting, it can stir up a lot of different types of emotions, right? So for some of us, it can feel really overwhelming. It can feel like a chore, and it can feel like it's maybe restrictive, or we can't have fun anymore. But for others, budgeting is seen as a tool. It's a tool that we have to use to be organized and be able to work towards those goals that we want to achieve. So hopefully by the end of the class, you'll be, if you are currently feeling a little stressed or overwhelmed right now, hopefully by the end of the class, you'll start be feeling a little bit better and see that budgeting doesn't have to be a terrible thing. It can be used for good. So hopefully we'll convince you of that. But we have another question for you in Menti, and that is, what do you like to plan for? You can select all that apply. So what kind of planner are you? And you might not be a planner, and that's an option too. I don't plan. That's an option down there that you can pick. But you like to plan for vacations, weekends, nights out, life events, holidays. Got an other in there. It's got some more bubbles coming in. All right, so far vacations is in the lead with a life events close second. Nice, cool. So yeah, we're kind of all over the place. I like it. Lots of different things that we like to plan for. So when it comes to our budget, all of our budgets are going to look a little bit different. Excuse me. All of our budgets are going to look a little bit different because we all have different things going on, right? We all have different types of expenses. As you can see here, we all have different things that we like to plan for, so naturally all of our budgets are going to look a little bit different. But even if they all look a little bit different, I think we are all ultimately searching for that security, right? We want to know that things are being taken care of, right? So we have that security, that peace of mind. And that having a budget can help us get to that point. So there's some different things that we're going to start out with when we're creating a budget. And first is just assessing, where are you now? So where are you now with your finances? Where are you now with your income? Where are you now with your expenses? Where are you with your budget? Perhaps you've never made a budget before. You're just kind of swiping your card as you go and hoping that there's enough money in the account to cover that expense at that time. Or maybe you made a budget a couple years ago and some life events have happened, things have changed, and might be time to kind of reevaluate that spending plan. So just being real and recognizing, where are you now in this moment in regards to your financial situation. And then where do you want to go? What are those goals and those things that you want to achieve? Perhaps your goal is to pay off your student loan debt as fast as possible, or perhaps you have a goal to buy a car, buy a house. Might have a goal to go on a really cool vacation. I see in the chat we got pay off student loan debt. I feel that for sure, big goal there. And you can absolutely achieve that, and your budget is going to be your tool to help you get to that goal that you want to achieve. And maybe, it doesn't even have to be some massive big thing like that. Your goal could be to, get a certain pair of shoes, or get, an Xbox or something. Or your goal could even be just to be comfortable, and not have those worries and stress that can be associated with money. But that goal is going to be unique to you. Home improvements, nice. I like that. That's super fun. Yeah, and your goal is going to be unique to you. It's going to be different for all of us. And when we're thinking about those goals, those things that we want to save up for, we also need to take a look at our spending. How are we spending our money? Where is our money going? And is it lining up with those goals? Do we know why we're making certain purchases or spending money the way that we do? And we're going to talk about that in a little more detail a little bit later in class. But ultimately our budget is a reflection of our priorities and our goals and those things that are really important to us, our values. So evaluating that spending, where's that money going? Is it lining up with those goals we want to work towards? Is something that we want to take that time and be reflective with. And sometimes this, might be a goal of ours. It might just be a life happens thing, but life events do happen. And when they do, whether they were initially planned or not, we have some steps that we can take along the way to come up with a plan to be prepared for that life event. And so this could be, this could be anything. This could be like a life event, like saving up for a house, or it could be saving for a vacation, right? We had a lot of planners wanting to plan for that vacation. It could look like getting married or having a kid, or, finishing school, like whatever that plan is, whatever it is for you, you can apply these steps. And so the first step is to look ahead, right? So when is this event happening? So for an example, I'm going to use a personal example. So I'm not originally from Colorado. So I am from the East Coast, and I moved here about 6 years ago. And so with our first step, that look ahead, it was like, okay, when are we moving? Like, we knew we were moving across the country to Colorado. We knew this at a certain point in the year, and we knew like we had to like kind of look ahead and see, okay, when is this? This is a pretty major event. When is this happening? And kind of having that date in mind. So whatever your event is, if it's a vacation, okay, when am I taking that vacation? Or saving up for a house, okay, when do I want to purchase that house? Next step is to prioritize, and that's just like make a list of what's important in regards to this event. For us, a big priority with moving was finding a place to live. that was pretty important for us, being able to make the move and know where we're going to be living. So that was a huge priority for us. But depending on what your event is, like I said, make a list, write it down. It helps so much to write stuff down. So write down what are those things that are really important to you that you want to prioritize in regards to this event, so you can keep that kind of at the forefront of your mind. And then research. So in my opinion, you can't do enough research. So research, and it doesn't have to just be on the internet, right? So yes, the internet has an incredible amount of information out there for you, but it's not the only place to do research, right? You can like check out different books. You can check out podcasts. You can ask people, to like talk to people, like see who knows who in regards to like that might specialize and whatever this event is. For us, like I said, a priority was finding a place to live out here in Colorado, making this really big move across the country. And so we did a lot of research on different neighborhoods. Like we knew we wanted to be in the Denver area, so different neighborhoods around Denver, like all different types of apartments that we could view, and just researching as much as we could, like about the city and about the state. But then it was also reaching out to like our friends and family, saying like, hey, I think I know that somebody that lives out there. And that friend was like, yeah, like this person lives there. I'll connect you. So they would connect us, and we could have those conversations with them, someone that was actually living out here already and could give us, some of that insider like information that you can't always find, on the internet or anything like that. And next step is to save and save. And so part of this is knowing like that timeline. So back to that first piece, look ahead, know when you're trying to like what your date, like kind of timeline is for how much time you have to save for this event. So for us, we knew that we had about 6 months between the time we found out we were moving and when we were actually moving. And so we were prioritizing saving as much as we could to help pay for the move, because that is not a cheap thing to do. So whatever your event is, whether it's, that house or that's like that graduation or that vacation, how many months do you have to save for it? So let's say you have 6 months until you're trying to achieve this thing. Then say, okay, what's the total amount I'm trying to save? Take that 6 months, divide that amount by the 6 months, and then you have like kind of a goal of each month of how much you're trying to set aside. And then lastly is just knowing your resources. So that kind of ties in also like with that research piece, just know your resources, know who you can go to, know what organizations you can reach out to for help, depending on what the life event is. There's lots of options out there, lots of people out there that want to help. And so doing that research to find those resources, ask family and friends, what kind of connections that they have. And that'll help you get set up for your plan for whatever that big life event is. But back to that budgeting piece, just knowing like having that budget in place is going to help us with all of this organization and all of this planning. And there's a lot of different budgeting strategies out there. So I'm going to hand it back to Sarah to talk through some.
Thank you, Katie. So as Katie said, your budget can help you reach all of these different goals and work through all of these different life events that might come up, as Katie talked about. And the key thing with your budget is that you want your budget to work for you. You want your budget to be personalized. You want it to consider a lot of different things that are unique to you because it's your budget, your goals, your life that you're working toward. So we're going to share several different budgeting strategies. Feel free to take whatever aspect of each of them and apply it to your budget, because there are a lot of great tips and tricks here that you can use, but you don't have to use just one of them. You can use as many as you want, and you can combine them and you can adapt them so it's helping you for your goals. So we're going to start with a few different types of budgeting strategies and some reasons why they're helpful or some reasons why people might use them. And then we're going to spend a lot of time on our favorite budgeting method. But before we talk about that, let's look at these. We have 4 different budgeting strategies up here. The first one is what is known as the envelope method. So old school with this one, you'd have actual envelopes. You'd figure out how much you want to put toward each category each month. And then on that envelope, you would write whatever that category is. So your rent envelope, your food envelope, your fun spending envelope, whatever those categories are. And then you would put the cash in those envelopes and spend it throughout the month. And when it ran out, you were out of that money for that category in that month. Now, this has become very popular. I've seen on TikTok for a lot of different savings challenges, a lot of different things people have. They'll use some version of the envelope method, but what a lot of people do these days is they utilize this with their online banking. So they will categorize their accounts, they will set those limits, they will name them that way. So that way they're using a version of the envelope method with those categories and those limits in a modern world. That one's really great for just like setting those goals and sticking to them and saying, this is how much I'm spending in this category each month. The next one we have on here is what's called the zero sum method. Now, this budgeting strategy is meant to help people who are in the scenario where they're spending along, like Katie talked about. They're not really sure what's going where. And then at the end of the month, they're like, oh no, what has happened? So with this budgeting strategy, you are allocating every single penny to something. And a lot of people use it to help maximize their savings goals. So they set those categories, and then whatever money they have left over, they intentionally put it towards savings or towards something. So that way, at the end of the budget, there's zero extra. Every penny is going towards something intentionally, be it some sort of savings account, a savings goal there, or one of the other categories that they'll spend on each month. And it just helps you know where your money's going. So there's nothing left over with that. Everything has a plan. Automatic budget helps a lot by utilizing something that people like, which is just to keep things easy, to keep things automated. Something that is automated, we don't have to think about, it's going through. We know our payments are being made. We know we're working toward our savings goals. We know all of these things are happening, and it just keeps it easy. This one is really great just to know those things are happening. So that way you don't have to worry about it, you don't have to think about it. It doesn't add extra stress. So automate everything that you can if that's something that works for you. So that way it's all going through and you know it's happening and you don't have to check every month to make sure. The last one up here is what's known as the reverse budgeting method. And this is for individuals who really want to prioritize their savings or debt repayment goals. It utilizes the concept known as pay yourself first. So in this scenario, someone meets their needs and then they figure out, okay, what are my savings goals? What do I really want to work toward? And tries to maximize those and kind of plans backward. And then whatever's left over after that is for their wants. Now, all of these budgeting strategies are great, and we'll talk about one budgeting method that is our favorite, but a lot of the times people just want to see an example budget. The one we have up here for you is very much just an example. And that's because nobody's budget, as I said earlier, is going to look the same. Everyone's budget is different and it all needs to be personalized for you all to work towards whatever it is you're working toward. But there are a few things about the sample budget that I want to point out. The first one is that when you are working on your budget, you want to assess all of the money that you might have coming in. And one way to do that, especially if you have inconsistent income, is to look over the past 3 months of income and your expenses. Anything can happen in a given month where you maybe make a little extra money or you have a lot of surprise expenses because things are different from month to month. So figuring out average and looking at those patterns can help you set a budget that's going to last throughout the year. Or until anything happens. So look at the past 3 months, figure out those patterns. That way you can work toward predicting what's going to come up in the future. The other thing I want to point out about here is that these categories might be different for everyone. So we've said a lot, your budget is unique to you. You want to figure out what those categories are that you'll include and then figure out your goals for those and make everything work. And then note how this particular example, they include all that income and then their expenses match it and they have intentional savings, intentional categories that they're working for in their budget. Now, before we move on to our favorite budgeting method, I see there are a few comments in the chat, so I just want to check to see what those are about. Love this. Envelope method for savings and not budgeting. Yeah, no, I've seen that on TikTok. I think it's pretty popular. It's a great way to really visualize your savings and make it material and get you to really like physically interact with it a little more. So if that is something you're interested in and it works for you, that's awesome. As we said, your budget is going to be something that works for you as well as your savings. Yeah. All right, let's take a look at our favorite budgeting method. So our favorite budgeting method is known as the percentile budgeting method, and it breaks your spending up into 3 categories. It's going to be your needs, your wants, and your savings. And you're going to put a certain percentage towards each of those each month. Before I give away what those percentages are, I'd love to have you all guess. So it's in order: needs, wants, savings. What do you think those percentages are? If you'll just take a second and Minty to take a guess. Yeah, the trouble with cash and money is it can fall into random cracks in your desk. There's a radio station locally here where they look around the office to find like whatever cash they missed throughout the year, and they're having people like guess how much they find each day, and they get to win the cash that got lost in the office. It's pretty interesting, but it's a very popular way to work towards savings goals. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you everybody for guessing. So we're in a lot of different places here. I love this. So we have a lot of people guessing 70, 20, 10, several people guessing 50, 30, 20, several people guessing 61, 27, 12. I love this all. And okay, so here's the thing. There is a name for this budgeting method, but none of you are wrong, because the key thing about this budgeting method is it is adaptable. It's a rule of thumb. So the percentages, as we've said, are really everything that works for you. But the name of the budgeting method, the guideline, if you will, is indeed the 50-30-20 method. So what that means is you're going to take your take-home pay. Now, your take-home pay, that's after taxes, after other deductions, and that is intentional because if you set your budgets with your pre-tax earnings and then taxes taken out, you might be a little sad because those numbers are going to be different, and we don't want you all to be sad. So we recommend budgeting with your take-home pay. And then in this scenario, if your take-home pay is 1,000, you'd put 50%, so 500 towards needs, 30%, 300 toward wants, and 20% and 200 towards savings. Now, once again, this is totally a rule of thumb. Those percentages aren't going to be exact for everyone. They're guidelines or recommendations to try to work towards those different goals and be conscientious of those different categories. But if you're in a situation where your needs really do take up 70%, that's okay. You'll make some adjustments in some other categories. The other thing here is that 20% towards savings can often seem like a lot to people at first. It's a really great goal to have. We recommend starting with what you can, setting some sort of savings goal, building the habit of paying yourself first, building that over time, and also noting that 20% towards savings includes a lot of different savings. We're going to go through different savings types here later in the class, but it includes any sort of debt repayment. So paying off credit cards, paying off student loans. It includes long-term savings like saving for retirement. And it includes all of those shorter term savings goals like saving up for payments that might come up later, saving up for a vacation you want to do in a year. Lots of different savings fall under that umbrella, which can make that 20% seem a little more approachable. Now, when people look at this, one question that tends to come up is, how do I know the difference between needs and wants? So I want to dive into that a little bit with you all. We have another Minty slide here that lists a lot of different topics that we might spend on in any given month. And I want you all to tell me for you as an individual, which one of these is a need and which one of these is a want. So there'll be little slidey bars and you just drag them to the appropriate slide. I love that a lot of you are familiar with envelope methods in one way or the other already. These are lovely. It's amazing. All right, we're getting a few responses in. We're pretty strong as a group on transportation, food, and housing. I think that makes sense. And we're pretty toward the wants for entertainment and subscription services and travel. And then more toward the middle for some of the other categories. Let's walk through these. So one thing that you all might have noticed when doing this activity is that there is a lot of gray area for each of these categories. So absolutely, yes, we need some form of transportation to get places. We need some sort of food to live life. We need some sort of housing to be safe and comfortable. But exactly what each of those things looks like might be different. Do we all need a luxury sports car? No, probably not. But we do need to be able to get to work, to get to the grocery store, to get to those places. Do we all need steak dinners to eat every night or need to go to Torchy's? I might make an argument that I need to go to Torchy's, frankly. No, right? Those are things we want. We want the specific food. We want the specific things, but we need to eat. So that's where that gray area comes in, is there are, for each of these categories, yes, there are needs that we have, things that absolutely must happen for us to be able to live. And then the more we dive into our wants for each of those categories, the more it becomes a gray area for a need and a want. One way you can approach this in your budget is for example, like the food category. You might have your grocery budget, which you would include in your needs percentile. And then you would have a fun food category for things like going out to eat, going to Torchy's, whatever it is, that's your fun food, and count that towards your wants percentages. That's one way to approach it. Then we also want to point out that with these wants, our wants are still a really, really important part of our budget. Yeah, traveling, entertainment, subscription services, a lot of us agree that these are wants in life. But if we had none of that at all, that would be not so ideal at all. And it would be a budget that's really, really hard to stick to. So that wants category is very important to include in your budget because it makes your budget realistic and personalized. But as you're going through this and trying to figure out, okay, like what do I prioritize? What are my real needs? What are my real wants? How do I suss out the wants that I include in my budget to the wants that I like just kind of want it, but not really? One way to figure out the answers to all of those questions is to think about your values. So I'm going to pass it back to Katie to dive into that a little more.
Yeah, so exactly like Sarah said, another way we can kind of look at our budget to determine what we do want to be spending our money on is to consider what our values are and what are those things that are really important to us. And, that's not the easiest question, right? Like if somebody just kind of walked up to you on the street, it was like, hey, name your top 5 values. Like you have to kind of like think about it for a second, most likely. So there's a lot of different exercises out there that can help kind of really narrow down what those top values are. If you're familiar with Brene Brown, she has a really great values-based exercise where it's just like a huge list of words and you narrow it down to your top 20 and then your top 10 and then your top 5. So you can keep narrowing it down as much as you want. But just take that time to reflect on it and think like, yeah, what is really, really important to me? Maybe you really value travel. And so you want to be spending your money on things that support that value, that support that goal of being able to travel. So your goals are important to consider in this too. And then once you think about what those things, what is important to you, what those values are, then take a look at your spending. It's like we were talking about earlier, kind of towards the beginning of class, is take a look at your spending and see if your spending is lining up and supporting those things that are important to you. And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no. And as you go through your spending, you can kind of go line by line through your statements and see, like really categorize what you're spending your money on and see if it's lining up. Ask yourself, like, are these different things important to me? And if they are, make them part of your budget. And if they're not, maybe, reevaluate. I've seen a couple of things in the chat about how important coffee is. For sure, I feel that. I feel that 100%. If it's important to you, if that's a value, make it part of your budget so that, you can have it. But yeah, just consider those things. And as you do this, you might see it's a shift in your mindset, right? You might start approaching purchases in a different light. And, asking yourself, okay, is this supporting what those really important things are to me? And a tool that you can use to help with this, to help you make a connection with those goals and those values, is to like get creative with your online banking. Like you can name your accounts different nicknames so that you can have that visual. Like having that visual can really help stick to those savings goals. So like for this example, we got a couple of different goals here. They're saving up for a car, they're saving up for a trip. They really value tacos. I feel that. I'm with Sarah. I love Torchy's so much. I am 100% in their rewards program and like utilize that as much as I can. But labeling like your accounts, like having multiple accounts to support those goals, then and the way that can help is like, let's say you're off making in a purchase. And maybe it's kind of like an impulse purchase. It's like, hey, this $100 pair of shoes are really nice and I want these. But the only way you can buy them is if you pull from your trip to Tahiti. That's the only way that you can afford, because you hadn't factored that in as part of your budget, this impulse purchase. So that might cause you to kind of stop and think like, oh, like how important is this to me? Like, do I really want to pull from this trip that I've been saving up for so that I can buy these shoes? Or maybe like, let me sleep on it, wait a day or two, see if I actually still really want them. So having that visual there, that connection can help with sticking to those goals. So we talked about food a couple of different times in class today. I am a big fan of food. I love it. I love tacos. They're just the greatest food that was ever invented. And food is a really big part of our budget. It's a huge part of our budget. And we are spending a lot of money every year on different types of food, whether that's going to the grocery store or eating out. And so Coloradans, we are actually spending like close to $40 billion a year on food. And that's split between food at home, which is groceries, and food services, which is going out to eat. So as you can see, that first graph on the left-hand side, it shows what percentage of our budget is going to those two different types of food. So we're spending close to the same amount of money on groceries and on eating out. But as you can see in the graph on the right, that is showing how much food we're getting for those dollars. So we're getting a lot more food for the same, cost of like going through the grocery store, and a lot less food by going out to eat. Now, I don't think I'm telling y'all anything that you don't already know, right? Yes, of course, it's better to shop at the grocery store, save a lot of money that way. Yes, eating out is expensive, and it keeps getting more and more expensive. So I don't think I'm sharing anything groundbreaking with you, but sometimes just like acknowledging that and just bringing that awareness to the situation can help us evaluate kind of our decisions and our choices and see like, okay, like maybe like I can make some adjustments. And so the average person is eating out about 6 times per week. But if they were to reduce that to 4 times per week, so we're still going out to eat, right? We're still satisfying that once category, but just bringing it down 2 times, that would actually save $784 per year. So we've got another Minty question. We want to hear from you. Like, what would you do if you had an extra $784? I see that comment. Yeah. So, well, I don't like the stats. Time is a big factor in the hustle culture now. Yeah, for sure. I get that. It's very, very convenient and easy to, swing through a drive-through, get some food to go on the way, for sure. And if that's like, if eating out more, if that's what fits into your life, then adjust your budget in that way. You wouldn't need to budget as much, for the groceries part, but if that's, more eating out is what fits into what you have going on, then just make sure it fits in your budget. Right. Let's see. Sarah, looks like we got some answers. Can you hit the enter button so we can see what they say? Awesome. Thank you. All right. So we've got lots of savings here. So increase my savings, invest and save, pay off student debt, credit card debt. Was there another line up top? Or was that
It's having trouble scrolling. I apologize.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I appreciate you. Put that towards fall semester, books and supplies, hobbies, activities. Nice. All right. So we've got a nice mixture here of savings and paying off some debts, doing some fun stuff too. Nice. So for those of you that have some kind of a savings component here, that's going to take us right into our next topic that we want to share with you, which is what those different types of savings are. So as Sarah mentioned when she was talking about the 50-30-20 budgeting model, that 20% towards savings, it's not just one type of savings, right? That's more of like an umbrella covering lots of different buckets of savings. And so at the bottom, we've got that periodic savings. So that is, we're saving for like kind of day-to-day stuff, right? So that might look like, we know once a year we have to pay our HOA dues. And so they do it annually. And so maybe whatever that amount is, you could split it up between 12 months of the year, save a little each month so that when that bill comes around once a year, it doesn't kind of throw you off guard. Or that might look like, you know that at some point you're going to have to get new tires on the car. And so you're putting some money away into savings to prepare for that event coming up. So periodic is just, regularly contributing to it. And that's, to save and pay for those kind of day-to-day things that like to come up. Our safety net savings, that is going to be like, we also call it our emergency savings. So this is the savings bucket to cover us in times of financial hardship or some type of really big life event that has a negative impact on our finances. And so we have this safety net there to help us get through that period of time. And we're going to go into that one in some more detail here in a second. But the last one is our long-term savings. That's kind of those more like down the road future things that we're thinking about. So that might be saving for a house, or saving for that really big vacation, or down the road saving for retirement. And so we have all these different types of savings, and we want to try to contribute to each of them. And all that makes up that 20% towards savings that's recommended. 20% of your budget goes towards that category. Well, let's focus in on that safety net a little bit more. So there's a couple steps to building that emergency fund. So first, like why? Why is this important? Life happens sometimes, and we're not always expecting it because it doesn't like to tell us when it's going to throw us some curveballs, right? And when emergencies happen, they can be really stressful, especially if we're not prepared financially for them to happen. So focusing and prioritizing that emergency savings will just help us tremendously for whenever these events will pop up down the road. And so the first step is just getting started. So that's just deciding, okay, how much each month do I want to put towards this saving? And so let's say you're using that 50-30-20 model. So you got 20% going towards savings. So you'll want to decide, okay, 20% of my budget is going towards savings. How much of that do I want to go to emergency savings? Or how much of it do I want it to go to that periodic savings? How much do I want it to go to the long-term savings? So decide how much of your budget, like a specific, percentage or dollar amount, that's going to go to just that emergency saving. And next, make it easy to get to. So you probably don't want your emergency savings tied up in like investments or a CD, like something that you would have to pay a penalty to get the funds out. So like a good interest, like savings or money market account, something that you can have easy access to so that when that emergency happens, you can get to those funds quickly. Next is to calculate your goals. So this is calculating, okay, how much do I want to build up this emergency savings? And the kind of general recommendation is that we have 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in our emergency savings. And I don't know about y'all, but that's a lot of money, right? Like the first time I sat down and calculated how much 6 months of my expenses, like what that number was, I was very overwhelmed. So you don't have to start out with such a big goal. A recommendation that we like to give is that you start out with a goal of $1,000. So start out with a goal of $1,000. $1,000 can cover quite a few emergencies that can pop up. And not a ton of Americans have $1,000 saved up. So prior to COVID, I believe it was like around 70% of Americans didn't have $1,000 saved and set aside for an emergency situation. Now, after COVID, with those like the checks that came out, I don't know why my brain just froze what the types of checks what they were called, but the checks that went out during COVID that everybody got, folks started to realize like, oh, like emergencies happen. Like, I mean, this is important. Like I should probably start saving some money. So now we're down to 59% of Americans don't have $1,000 saved up. So we'd love to see that percentage continue to go down. Love to see more and more folks have that $1,000 set aside for an emergency situation. But that's a good first goal to start with. Another option would be to to calculate your goals, decide, okay, what do like 3 to 6 months of my rent looks like what's that, and save that up. And then, okay, what does 3 to 6 months of my utilities look like, and save that, or 3 to 6 months of food, and then save that amount. So you can break it up any way that makes sense for you. And then next step is to define an emergency, and that's going to be different for all of us, right? So ultimately, an emergency is going to be something that has a negative financial impact on us, but still it's going to look different for everybody. So decide what is an emergency to you, and that's what you'll want to use this savings for. And lastly is know your unknowns. So there are known unknowns and then unknown unknowns. Known unknowns are the things like having to replace the tires on your car. At some point that's going to have to happen. You just don't know when it's going to happen. So we want to try to save something like that we know is going to happen eventually, for that kind of periodic savings. We're kind of setting money aside for something like that. Our unknown unknowns, those are the things that we really hope don't ever happen, but they could, and we don't know when they could. And that might look like losing our job, or having like a medical emergency, or something like that, like I said, we hope don't happen, but they could. And they, those kind of bigger things will have a really serious financial impact on us. And so we want to try to save our emergency savings for things like that. But while we're working through our budget, we want to be mindful of anything that could pop up and potentially throw us off track. So I'm going to hand it back over to Sarah to talk about some budget busters and wrap us up.
Thank you, Katie. So there's a quote I want to share with you all just to kind of think about and relate to these topics. And it's, beware of little expenses. A small leak will sink a great ship. So a lot of the times when we're looking through our budget, we might find a lot of little things that are little expenses, and they don't seem like much at first. But when you add up all those little expenses that are going towards something you may not value, or you may not even be aware about, that can really poke major holes in our budget as they add up. So one thing to do is be aware of these budget busters. Look through your spending, pay attention to those habits. Is there a place or something that you buy on a regular basis that has just become a habit? And when you're looking back through your past 3 months of spending to figure out those patterns, figure out those averages, pay attention to those habits and ask yourself, is this something that's really important to me? Is it something that I value? Is it something that I want to incorporate into my budget? Or is it a habit that I've developed that I might not have been aware that I developed, and it's getting my budget in a big way? We've talked about coffee a lot. When I was in college, there was an on-campus coffee shop that had very delicious coffee. It had the most wonderful mocha chai. And I would go in there like 3 times a day and buy a mocha chai. And we're talking Starbucks prices. So it was like $15 a day I would sometimes spend on coffee. And it was coming out of my student like food account, which made it even easier because I had the mentality that it was like it was my food money and coffee counts, right? And then I got toward the end of the semester and I did not have any money for food on that account at all whatsoever. So I had to realize that my coffee habits of buying this really expensive coffee every day had become some sort of much bigger problem. And I had to evaluate, okay, yes, I absolutely need coffee. That's something that I would consider a need, but I don't need it to be a mocha chai. I can switch over to drip coffee, spend a lot less, and then have room in the budget for other more important things. Impulse buying is also a major budget buster. And this one is really, really hard, especially with click culture. We get a lot of advertisements out there. We see something that we might want. We're like, ooh, shiny, click on it, buy it. But that can also get your budget in big ways. For this one, we recommend having lists and sticking to them, especially when you're going into stores, and try to avoid those window shoppings. Obviously, with all the ads that pop up, that can be really hard to avoid at all if you're on any sort of internet platform or social media. But being aware of it and saying, oh, wait, am I impulse buying? Is this what's happening? Can help prevent it. And then also setting some sort of savings rule for yourself or a spending rule for yourself where you say, I'm not going to buy anything impulse buy. If there's something I see that I want, I'm going to put it in my cart and wait like 24 hours and just have that wait time to give yourself some time to process. Did I really want that? Am I sure about that? I know some things have like countdowns for like whatever it is with the sales, and it puts even more pressure on you. Those are those psychological tactics those companies are trying, but coming up with your own rules can help you prevent those as well. And then retail therapy is the last one on this list. Definitely know that when like life is stressful, things happen, there's a lot going on, and sometimes making certain purchases can help with that. But be aware of this and try to come up with alternatives. And then if there is something that you feel like it would help you to have that, to be able to go buy those things, spend that money on something to work through whatever it is, then include that in your budget. So that way, you know, it's money you're going to be spending. Again, that's why we have the wants category. So that way we're meeting those needs and working through whatever it is going on there with the retail therapy, but including that in your budget can help you a lot with making sure that there's some space for grace there. Now, there is another category that we talked about a little bit earlier that gets a lot of us, and it is those subscriptions. So I have a Minty up here, and it is how much do you think the average person spends on subscription services each month? So it's not just Netflix and Hulu, it's overall subscription services, but how much do you think they spend each month? All right, we got a few good guesses here. Nobody thinks it's 400. We don't like, it's not. No, I don't think I've had anybody ever guess all the way to 400. Oh, we're climbing though.
I'll say
Interesting.
whoever's saying 50, I want to know what your secret is because mine
Right,
definitely
right.
aren't that cheap.
Yeah. All right, let's see what it is. Oh, right there in the middle. So yeah, it is about $219 that the average person spends on subscription services each month. Now, as I said, this isn't just your entertainment subscription services. This includes the wide variety of monthly subscription service type things that we can sign up for. And there are a lot of them out there. I was teaching a class at a high school just the other day, and we were asking the students if they had income and what they had to spend that income on. And one student said that she got a job so that she could get subscription services for her dog. And kudos to her. She loves that dog, values that dog. She's getting that dog that bark box every month, and that is what is important to her. There really are a ton of things out there that could be subscription services. And because there are so many things to keep track of, 74% of people say it's easy to forget those monthly subscription charges. There's so many things, it's easy to forget them. So with that, check in on what you're paying for. There are some apps out there you can use to monitor your subscriptions. If you have an iPhone, you can check on the ones that you're paying through that, check your bank statements to see, and you know, don't let yourself forget them as easily. It's hard to do, a lot to keep track of, but monitoring those can help. Now, I know Netflix has been buckling down and some other companies have been buckling down on sharing passwords and things. But even then, 56% of people still do not share streaming services with someone. So while I know a lot of platforms are buckling down on that password sharing, there are some ways around this. So if you are interested in watching different shows on different platforms or utilizing different like subscription platforms for whatever it is, monitor the ones that you're actively using and only pay for the ones that you're actively using. And you can cancel the ones you're not using at that time through that monitoring process. So you're only paying for the shows you're watching, you're only paying for what you're listening to and the products you're using. And then if you decide to switch over and watch a show on another platform or use some other subscription service, then you can move over to that one. So that way you're cycling through those and only paying for what you're using at the time rather than paying for something that you're not using. And then maybe if you come back to one you canceled, you might even get a discount for being a returning customer. Now, we've already mentioned the no longer using piece, but 42% of people in this survey continued to pay for recurring monthly subscriptions they weren't using. So cancel those things, monitor that information, only pay for the stuff you're using because it can add up and it can add up pretty quickly. Now, subscriptions are not the only thing, and those other budget busters are not the only thing that can get our budget. There is something that is known as lifestyle creep, and it is a habit that people build that puts us in cycles of living paycheck to paycheck. So how it works is we are living life, we're functioning with a certain income, and then we get a raise and have that extra money and increase our spending habits to continue living paycheck to paycheck, which continues this cycle that moves on and on and on. Now, there are a few things to consider here. One is that if there are necessary upgrades, if there's something where you're like, I really needed that raise because I needed like to get a new car. For example, my previous car before I changed to this job was literally duct taped together and would not start on occasion. It was an unreliable vehicle. I needed a reliable vehicle for this job because we drive all over the Front Range to teach classes. So I needed to upgrade my vehicle when I got that increase in income. But if there are things that are not necessary upgrades, consider increasing your savings goals first to work toward those long-term goals to build your overall financial security before increasing your wants spending. And then be aware that this is a cycle that a lot of people tend to fall into. So focus on those savings goals, focus on using a lot of those tips and tricks Katie and I shared throughout this class to reach whatever your goals are, whatever it is you're working for, and find a budget that's going to help you live a life of financial security. So that is all we have for you all today, except for, oh, I forgot about that slide. This is a lot to keep track of. We recommend using some sort of budgeting app that can help you monitor all of that information. We have one, it's called ENT's Money Insight. It's free. There's a version called Money Insight Lite for non-members, and it can help you track your spending, set approximate budgets, etc. But we recommend finding a free budgeting tool, emphasis on the free, because we don't want to pay money to manage our money there. But Money Insight's a great one for you. And then the last slide is the most impactful takeaway. So something you all learned from this class. I see I have a few things in the chat to respond to. This is anonymous. Your answers won't pop up on the screen like they have with the others. And if you have any questions, we are right at 4, but we'll hang out a few minutes. If you are able to ask your questions, we'll answer them.
Yeah, Sarah, we had one question in the chat. So looking at the 50, 30, 20 budget, how would you recommend breaking up that 20% into the 3 different savings categories? And my first thought is to like first take a look at like evaluate what those goals are. Like first think about what are the goals that you want to save for, and then also look through your spending to see what are those periodic things that you need to be prepared for. And then, once you have kind of all of that in mind, then you can see what your income looks like, how much you feel comfortable putting towards savings as a whole, and then decide, okay, of that amount, is there something particular I'm saving for that I need to be sure I'm putting a certain amount each month towards that, or looking at, because it's going to be a little different for everybody depending on what our goals are and what those periodic expenses are that we need to be ready for. But I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Sarah.
No, I think that's a great response, and I was just going to go ahead and stop share there so we could all be on the same screen. Yeah, there are a lot of ways to approach splitting up that 20%, focusing on those goals and those values, as Katie said. And then because that 20% towards savings does include debt repayment, if you have some debt that you need to consider taking a look at, how much of a financial impact it could have to pay any of that off earlier, and just taking some comparisons to see how that would look for your specific situation is something else I would add to your answer.
Oh. That's perfect. And was there did I see a question in Minty?
I believe it was an answer to
okay, perfect.
50-30, or the first question. Hold on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What other questions? Feel free, you can unmute yourself if you want to, or throw it in the chat. See, how much does your student loan balance affect the kind of mortgage you can qualify for?
So your student loan balance can affect the kind of mortgage you can qualify for. Depending on the financial institution you're getting your loan from, they will either use a percentage of your student loan balance when looking at your debt to income ratio, or they will use, if you're in active repayment, what your monthly agreed upon repayment is. So it does affect it. And it depends on if you have any other kind of debt and what your overall debt to income ratio is. So for those who are unfamiliar with DTI, or debt to income ratio, when you're applying for loans, a lot of the times they'll look at how much debt you have already versus how much you make to make sure you can make the payments that you would be making for that loan.
Great questions. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah.
Anyone else before we wrap up?
I was wondering if you guys would want to put your information in the chat so that anybody who might have more questions would be able to reach out, if you don't mind sharing.
Absolutely. Those are emails.
Feel free to reach out anytime.
You can check out ent.com, our website, for all sorts of information on ENT. We have a financial education center on there as well that has a ton of resources.
Cool. Well, thank y'all so much for having us today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. And thank you, Sarah, and you guys for coming. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Amber. Thank you, everybody. Great questions.